Sir Keir Starmers' top aide, Sue Gray, now earns more money than her boss, the Prime Minister. How did that happen? She was given a significant pay rise after the election. She now gets around £170,000 a year. That's a move that has reportedly prompted anger amongst Labour colleagues.
Well, it comes as the government faces increasing criticism over its plans to take £300 from millions of pensioners by scrapping the winter fuel payment. And we're joined now by Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds. Good to see you this morning, Mr Reynolds.
Good morning.
Is Sir Keir Starmers' Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, the only pensioner who's going to feel better off under this new government?
No, I can tell you that all pensioners will be better off under this new government because, first of all, we're committed to the triple lock. So the state pension obviously went up £900 this year. It will go up, I'd expect, about £400 next year over the course of a parliament. That is a guarantee that the state pension will go up to be a greater share of national income. Energy bills are also coming down. But, you know, we've talked about this before. I'll be clear. This is not a decision on winter fuel payment we wanted to make. But unless you have a government committed to being responsible with the public finances, we've got to react to what we found when we've walked through the door. We've had to make some decisions which, frankly, I wish we didn't have to make. But if you haven't got that commitment,
they're not going to feel better off right now, though, in the way that Sue Gray is, are they? Because those measures you mentioned come in over the next couple of years, for starters. Who exactly is going to feel better off?
Well, pensioners will feel better off this year because the state pension has gone up significantly. It will go up significantly next year as well.
Doesn't offset that cut, though, is it, for those 1.8 that will lose it?
Actually, in terms of the monetary value, it would be higher than the cut would be based on, I'd assume, average earnings would be what the triple lock for state pensions goes up next year. But I don't hide from the fact it's a difficult decision. It's one we didn't want to have to make. Yeah. But I do think everyone benefits from a government that is responsible with the public finances, because I've seen very vividly what happened, obviously, with that horrible Liz Truss period, where the government didn't do that. Higher costs in terms of government spending, but also for mortgages, for everyone.
Well, never mind,
so
Liz
it has
Truss.
to be important.
That's water under the bridge. Let's talk about you now. Did you expect, a couple of months in, I think 77 days in, to be so much on the back foot in terms of perception? I mean, look at these headlines. The King of the Cadgers, that's your Prime Minister, the King of the Cadgers. Daily Mail, Starmer has declared freebies of £100,000, 2.5 times that of the next MP's claims. It doesn't look good, does it, to have a Prime Minister who's saying that things are going to get worse before they get better, and who's taking away the heating allowances for pensioners who are now going to be shivering in their second-hand woolies to be walking around in a host of posh suits and wearing extremely expensive designer glasses, all given to him for free, to a total value of £100,000. I mean, he might have accepted the specs, but where were his optics?
Well, look, I think there are different ways supporters support politicians. If that's about their professional job, in this case being the Prime Minister, and that is declared transparently, whether it's personal support or support for staff, campaign support, I've no objection to that. I think what people ultimately care about is, does the government do a job? Does it make public services better, housing better, the economy better? That's what people will judge.
You may have no objection to it, but a lot of people do. You should see the letters pages in the newspapers. You should see the online comments. You say you don't have a problem with it. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the problem is you can't see how this is being perceived by the voters.
No, I think ultimately governments are judged by what they do. Do they deliver on their promises? Do they do a job? That is what this government is doing. You will have to wait a few days, not long, until the budget and the spending review, where you can get the real sense, the real priorities of a new government. This stage is a little bit frustrating as you're preparing for that. But look, that is what governments are ultimately judged upon.
Can't you see the discrepancy here? That how it looks to see a newly elected Labour Prime Minister going to watch his football team, in this case the Arsenal, at a freebie cost of £8,500 a game. Can't you see how it looks?
Well, look, I'd say that the Prime Minister's a genuine Arsenal fan. It's a little bit different going to a football match when you are the Prime Minister. Some different factors involved in that. I don't think anyone would really object to the Prime Minister and his own football team being in the director's box or wherever you're sat.
But they do.
In the ground.
You keep saying that you don't think people object. They do. Pick up any paper this morning, whether it's The Guardian, whether it's The Star, and you will see that there are objections aplenty. You can't keep saying that people don't object. I put it to you that they do object.
Well, I would say if people... I don't think they do actually think the Prime Minister going to a football match is the same necessarily as just walking through when you're not the Prime Minister. And I think they would recognise that. I can tell you the Prime Minister works extremely hard. If he's got a little bit of time to see his own football club, I think that's fair.
Eight and a half grand a pop. That's OK.
Well, he's doing exactly the right thing by being entirely transparent around that. But, yeah, I think if he wants to go and see his own football team, and that is in a particular part of the stadium, again, the Prime Minister having that ability to do so.
Setting out a double down, don't you?
And I suppose he can't sit in his paid-for-himself seat, can he, because of his new position. Look, we're looking at figures this morning. I'm sure you've seen them. New research that says we are the sick man of Europe. Sick woman of Europe, if you want to be even-handed. It's just an old expression. Why is it that our benefits are so much higher in terms of health benefits than the rest of Europe, and yet our figures, if you look at other surveys, in terms of delivery on cancer stats, on mental health, are so much worse too? What are we getting wrong?
Well, I think there was a really important report from the noted surgeon, Lord Darcy, for the government fairly recently, talking about how the NHS, something we all deeply support and cherish, but you're right to say those health outcomes have to improve, and that's why Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has been absolutely clear that for us, of course, we want to give the financial support to the health service it needs, those pledges in the election about more operations, more doctors, more nurses, but also we've got to look at how the NHS functions. We've got to be willing to reform it as well. I mean, Wes has been incredibly brave at times in making the case for that. But I think that is important. But also, I think those figures would probably show that we've got some wider factors. I mean, we have, an incredible increase in the UK after the pandemic of the number of people who are too ill to work and not getting the kind of work that they need, how we reform the labour market, how we change employment law. That's part of my job as well. So I think the whole system can't just be the NHS. It's got to be about how all that fits together.
Looking ahead to this coming winter, it's getting closer and closer now. There are some meteorological predictions that are beginning to say that it could be especially cold. If we get a very long, exceptionally cold spell, which happens in this country, and pensioners who cannot afford to heat their homes properly, if at all, because you've cut the allowance, start to die. And, by the way, that's something which Labour predicted a few years ago when the Conservatives were thinking of doing something similar to winter fuel benefits. Is there the remotest chance of you doing a U-turn?
That should not and will not happen, and I think it's important not to scare people.
Well,
let's just reflect on the fact. Let me just say very clearly, the state pension this year is higher than it was last year in real terms. Energy bills will be lower in real terms than they were last year. The winter fuel payment is still there for people who need it the most, people who receive pension credit, so it's going to the people who need it the most. And on top of that, you have the continuation of things like the household support fund, so a discretionary pot of money to make sure people who need it the most are getting that. So let's not scare people.
You're saying, in effect, that pensioners who are worried about this winter are worrying about nothing. They've got nothing to worry about. They'll be fine, according to you.
Look, I understand there are always worries, but I think we shouldn't forget the fact that this benefit still exists. It's just targeted at the people who need it the most. I understand there'll still be people who feel aggrieved by that. I wish we didn't have to make that decision, but if there wasn't a responsible government in terms of the national finances, things would be worse for everybody. But I don't want to alarm people. Let's be clear, difficult as this is, that people will be better off this winter, and that support is still targeted to people who need it the most. I think we all have to be responsible and make sure people understand that.
Well, we'll take that then as a no to my question about will there be a U-turn, even in the most exceptional of circumstances this winter. Well, I guess we'll see. Jonathan Reynolds, thank you very much indeed for taking time to take our questions this morning. Good to talk to you. Thank you.